everybody, and welcome to a video where we're going to be building some computers, but without technically building any computers. Because we're going to be doing some shopping in real time to see what sort of deals you can get right now, and we're going to be using that information along with my extensive tome of PC building knowledge and experience to actually create a budget gaming computer, a more mid-range one, and of course a luxury beast. So let's plumb this in. We'll go for budget build, mid-range behemoth. High Performance Empress. That's not a title I've used before, but actually it has a nice ring to it. So to kick things off, I think we're going to start with our budget build, and there's a few different things I would highly recommend that you do before anything else. Number one is always to set yourself a firm budget and really try to stick to that as best as possible. Yes, if you're a little bit out of the way, then obviously you can pick it up a few weeks later when you get your next paycheck, but realistically there's no point planning something super high end if you just ultimately can't afford it. And I would strongly recommend that you decide on a monitor, or at least the resolution and refresh rate of the games that you want to play before you do anything else. Ultimately, if you're just going to play Valorant on a 1080p monitor at 60 frames a second, you don't really need anything too intense at all. However, if you're going to play on something like this, which is 144 Hz, super high resolution ultra-wide monitor, then obviously you will need something a little bit more high-end. For this build though, I think we're going to go for as cheap as we can possibly get away with, and the way you're going to do this is by using an APU, the Ryzen 5600G. Which of course, bearing in mind we won't need a graphics card at all because all of the processing for both the CPU and the GPU is done on one chip, is going to save us a heck of a lot of money. We then need to decide on a motherboard and a case, and this is where I guess you could get a little bit creative because some people are going to want huge towers that you can upgrade later, others you want something really small. And I have actually just completed a build where we did all of this but with ITX, so it's a very small system. You can find that video in the top right corner of your screen if you want to learn a little bit more, but I think that for today we're going to go for something a little bit bigger, micro ATX, because it's cheaper and ultimately you have more room for upgrades. So let's have a look at motherboards first, and of course we want B550. So you've got MSI's Pro, B550 from Gigabyte. I've not heard fantastic things about this board, to be honest. Oh, this one's very good though. I've used this before, the B550M Aorus Elite, currently $89.99. I believe this one also has BIOS flashback, which is going to be pretty useful here because if you're using a newer CPU like this and the older motherboard has an older BIOS, then it doesn't mean you have to run out and get a different chip just to update it. You can do it just by using a USB drive and no RAM or processor inside the board. Then let's look at the cases. Micro ATX. Citadel Mesh, $62.99, that's going to be a decent option. It has a bit of RGB, mesh at the front, good for cooling. Can we get anything under £50? Can that be done? Aerocool Bolt, I mean that would probably work. Lee, $49.99. So you do actually have a mesh panel here at the front. It's not huge, the whole thing isn't mesh, but again, for this sort of build and realistically any sort of realistic upgrade you're going to do, so maybe like an RTX 3060 Ti or something, I think this is still going to be okay. So I think we're going to go for this. To fully complete our motherboard combination, we are of course going to need an SSD to actually store Windows and all of the games, and of course some RAM or some random access memory. It's DDR4, not DDR5 that we need here for this. A lot of it is going to have RGB and it is going to look a lot better in your system, but obviously if you're trying to build the cheapest gaming piss poor performance, the cheapest gaming PC possible, then RGB is probably the first thing that should go out the window. So what have we got here? Some Team Group Vulkan, $55.99. That is looking pretty appetizing to me. 8 GB of Kingston Fury. No, £50. You're having a laugh. And then in terms of SSD, we will want it to be PCI Generation 3, but it doesn't need to be anything particularly crazy. I've seen these a lot recently, these WD Blue SN570s. I think they're pretty new. $52.99. It's not the absolute fastest out there. 3500, 2300 on the read and write. We're not going to need any fancy cooling or anything. We use the stock cooler that comes with the CPU. So actually the only other thing that we need, other than a copy of Windows that you might already have that you can transfer for free, is actually a power supply. We'll look for around about a 600 watt one. Seasonic. That's not a bad shout. 550 watt, $47.99. Or just play it safe and go with the Corsair one. And then I think that's actually it. With delivery, they're quoting £506. £506 for a gaming computer that you will be able to play the vast majority of titles on. Granted, not all of them actually play particularly well. Apex Legends in particular, I didn't really have the best experience with this, and it's not a PC I think I would recommend for Apex. But especially lighter titles, things like Valorant, even a bit of F1 2021 ran quite well on it. It's not the absolute fastest gaming PC, but for anyone that wants to grab a gaming computer now that you can play on the APU, and then as soon as you can upgrade and grab yourself a graphics card, it'll become this like super gaming PC later, I think it's a great option. A lot of people are always asking me what this organization list tool thing is, by the way, and it's called Trello. It's completely free. I use it all of the time. And the cool thing is you can learn to make your own web apps with zero experience, all thanks to the sponsor of today's video, Boolean. Boolean is offering completely free coding sessions, with the next available on the 15th of March, designed for absolute beginners or anyone that's just itching to find out more about what coding actually is and ultimately whether it's a hobby or career for them. During this session, you'll learn the basics of HTML, CSS and JavaScript, and you'll see a live web app being created in real time. This should give you an idea of exactly what you'd be able to do in just a couple of months of learning, and ultimately it will show you just how fun and creative coding can be. It is a fully interactive demo, so if there's anything that you just don't understand or you want to learn more about, then you can ask your questions throughout the session. Again, it's totally free and you'll instantly know whether coding is something for you. If it is, then Boolean offer a full-time course to help you get started with your career in tech. It is way cheaper than university, with an option to study now, pay later, and a money-back guarantee that ensures you get yourself a job in tech or your money back. So if you want to learn more about coding, again with absolutely no prior experience necessary, then you can find everything you need with a link down below to sign up for a free taster session and hopefully sign up for a course that could potentially change your life. But pressing swiftly on, we can now move on to our mid-range behemoth. I think I sound pretty cool when I say that. And of course, the elephant in the room with this is that you are going to need a graphics card. And I think the best mid-range card at the moment is the RTX 3060 Ti. I mean, if we move over to scan and we have a look, don't mind me, the cheapest one you're looking at, $634.99. And that's open box refurbished. eBay got anything? Yes, they do. Under £600. And Overclockers UK, yeah, all over 600. Looks like we're buying from eBuyer then. Buying. I mean, it's meant to be around about 370, 400 pounds. So you're paying a premium of around about 180 quid. Let's have a look at some cases though. This is always pretty exciting. It's one of my favorite bits of PC building. Ultimately, it's the thing you're going to be looking at and it's going to sit on your desk for hopefully years to come. And I would always avoid things like this where the whole front panel is just solid. As soon as you start talking about a serious gaming computer, airflow is very important. The 5000X is a very good option if you do want something that is a little bit more glassy. Also classy, but I love the fact that you actually have big airflow gaps within that, so you don't have to feel like you're making a huge compromise. Oh, here you go, the Phanteks Eclipse P400A and the LANcool 2 Mesh, both brilliant options, but as you can probably tell, I'm a sucker for Phanteks cases, so let's go with the P400A. Motherboards, let's go for an Intel rig this time, maybe B660? There's a Gigabyte gaming one, or a Gigabyte? Don't think they've spelt that right. Strix boards I love, but that is just way too much money for what we're looking at. Tomahawk, very good option, £190. Also with the TUF, £190. Let's go for the Tomahawk. It's a good looking board, it's got plenty of features, it's got decent I/O, and because it's B660, it is going to support the latest features with things like PCIe Generation 5. So here's your 12600K, that would be brilliant if you're going to overclock. But for this B550 motherboard, the 12600 non-K, non-F seems to be a brilliant option. Now we need to grab ourselves a CPU cooler. This is actually now the second time that I've done this sequence to camera to talk about coolers because things get slightly awkward when you're talking about Intel 1700, which is the new socket that's used on B660 motherboards, H670, and Z690, because not really most things that you're going to buy off the shelf are going to work out the box. You're going to have to go and get adapters, and they're quite easy. You can just go to the manufacturer's website and most of them will give you either a free kit or one you can buy for a very small amount of money. But the problem is that not all of the motherboards will then be compatible with the coolers even then, because the spacing is slightly different and you might have clearance issues, which might mean you don't get all of the RAM slots or it just might not fit at all. Here you've got some good options at the moment. You've got the Dark Rock 4 from Be Quiet. This says it will work, but it has a slightly amber warning signal that some of the RAM slots might be lost. And then you have the Corsair iQ H15i, and I think this is a brilliant option, and it is what I'd like to go for today. But do bear in mind you probably will need to buy an adapter bracket for it. Then we're going to need some RAM. Best sellers include some Vengeance RGB Pro SL. This kit is a 3200 MHz kit, but this one, which is going to be slightly taller, is currently 70, and I think this is going to be a better bet purely because it is faster. Then we can move on to our M.2 SSD, and I want to go for a terabyte drive here, ideally PCI Generation 4. SN850, £156, that's looking pretty good to me. Although there's a brilliant offer over here, look, on the 530 1TB. I've used this loads of times, I know it's good. Except if you scroll down, they have the exact same thing, but without the heatsink, slightly cheaper, and as we know from experience, taking the heatsink off one of these things is actually not recommended, so I would go with this version. I believe with this case we get 3 RGB fans on the front, which is fantastic, but then you're not going to have anything at all at the back. So here you go, look, some SK fans. You're going to want another one of these. I believe it's a 120 on the back. And then last, but certainly not least, you're going to need a power supply. And here we're going to be looking at an 800 watt unit. So I think this gives you a great balance between price and performance. The TX850M, £90, fantastic option, though it is only a bronze rated power supply. So I think this Thermaltake gold rated fully modular power supply for £90 should take priority. Drum roll please for the total price of our mid-range behemoth. It comes in at £1,527, including £7.81 shipping. I think the most important thing to bear in mind is obviously the possible incompatibility on the cooler, but I think all things considered, a proper baller gaming PC like that for around about 1,500 quid is still pretty good. I think we're on to a winner. But what if you don't want to be a winner? What if you want to be a destroyer and just spend all of the money that you have and get the absolute best gaming PC ever? Well, we're not going to do anything stupid here, but we are going to build what I would describe as the high performance Empress PC. And we're going to impress you with our sensible spend of a lot of money. And I think I would go for the 3080, that's still probably the best high-end option. £1,189, great. Is that literally our only option? RTX 3080 from eBuyer, that's interesting. You can get a 3080 plus a motherboard here, but what motherboard is it? B550F, that's a pretty good offer though, I have to admit. I mean, just look, every single website has them for way more money. Way more money. I think this is definitely a little bit of a head over heart situation because in terms of pure gaming PC, you're not going to see any benefits from going for like an Intel motherboard really at the moment, assuming you get a super high-end Ryzen CPU, and benefits like PCI Generation 5, again, you're not really going to see any performance gain until a lot later down the line. So to be able to get a motherboard and a 3080 for this price, I think, is too good to pass up at the moment. But I know this might be a slightly controversial choice. I think we'd bump up our memory though to 16 gigabytes times 2 for a total of 32 gigabytes. I think we'd keep a lot of the previous goodies from our last build though, because you don't really need to upgrade them. So the same power supply, the same SSD, the same cooler. We'll grab ourselves a Ryzen 5900X because here we're getting extra cores, extra performance. Now Intel have come out with their latest generation, this has only made the Ryzen 9s even less money. I think the last piece of the puzzle is going to be to actually grab a case. This one, I'm not a big fan of, it just looked a little bit weird on the front to be honest. Again, the Lee & Lee I think is just a bit too expensive. Maybe something like the Meshify? It's a little bit on the small side maybe. You know what, I know it is probably a little bit boring, but let's go for the iQOO 5000X because when you combine this with the RGB RAM and the CPU cooler that we're using, it does look pretty epic. And once again, that brings us to drum roll conclusion time, where we're looking at a total of £2,251.55. Not a small amount of money, but this very much is very close to ultimate gaming PC territory. I mean, even if you put an RTX 3090 in this exact same system, you're not really going to get that much more performance. This is going to be a 4K beast. You can whack this on a 4K TV, 120 Hz, and while it won't be in every game, a lot of them will actually run at that refresh rate and of course at that resolution, which is pretty cool. I would absolutely love to hear your feedback on this. What did you like about these builds? What would you build yourself? What would you change? And of course, as always, if you do want to check out current pricing on any of these parts, then of course you can find that all linked down below. Smash the like button if it's been useful, subscribe for more like this, including the full water-cooled PC that I'm almost done and it's so exciting. But until then, I'll catch you in the next one.